Your future is in your hands. Don't wait for someone to come around and say, you know what, we've decided we're not going to send all our sales requests to you anymore. We're going to stop doing that so you can go out and do market research, right? That's not going to happen.
Welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
Hello and welcome to episode 40 of these things. Oh my gosh. Yes, 40 of these things are in the can. This week, Jeff Lash, Vice President of Product Management Research and Advisory Services for SiriusDecisions, joins me to discuss the role of the product manager and why there's not as much clarity around the job as there is in other departments within many organizations. I really enjoyed this conversation with Jeff, and I know you will too. But before we jump into that, I wanted to quickly remind you about the upcoming live show at Fulton Brewery Tap Room in downtown Minneapolis, October 1st. Mark your calendars now. On top of that, it's a free event presented by Foundry and by Fulton. And make sure you keep listening to the show because I'm going to be announcing the guests very, very soon. Speaking of guests, let's jump right into my conversation with Jeff. Jeff, thanks for joining me today on the show. I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Jeff, talk to me about your background. How did you get into doing the type of work you're doing? And then tell me a little bit about the role you currently have.
Yeah, so I'll give you the abridged career history in maybe 30 seconds. So I started out in actually more on the technology side, on development, product development, web development, as I like to say, back in the day when one person could do everything from setting up a web server to developing the graphics and everything in between. Mm-hmm. And then obviously the technology progressed. I was never really a strong technologist. I was never really a great designer, but I really found a lot of interest and felt like I aligned well with the idea of user experience and information architecture and interaction design. So I kind of moved from a general product development ish role to user experience, and that was how I ended up in product management through kind of a number of different roles. But I kind of dipped my toe in at first and felt like this might be worth a shot, and then very quickly realized this was the right thing for me. It was a nice blend of the business and marketing background that I had, the technology experience I had gathered through working, and then I think the idea of being focused on customers and users and really understanding what people need and developing great products for them. So it just kind of felt like a great fit for me. And I was in product management for a number of years, probably about a little over a decade or so. And then I made the transition from a practitioner where I had been, a product manager. I had managed product management teams. I had done portfolio management. I made the transition from being a practitioner to being, an analyst. So in my role at SiriusDecisions now, I really focus on doing research and looking at what are best practices in B2B product management, and working with clients to help them understand what those best practices are, helping them to adopt them and to put them into practice in their organization.
Cool. It sounds like a fun job. What do you think is one of the more challenging things about doing that type of work? I recently had someone on who basically said, well, a big part of my job is arguing with middle managers all day.
Yeah, as I said, the nice thing is, when clients come to us and I get to work with them, like they need, they admit they need help or they want to improve. So usually we don't have to do a lot of convincing on that. I think, the nice thing about my job, one of the things I like about it is the variety. In a given day, I might be talking with 2, 3, 4, 5 different companies, and then you add that up over the course of a week and a month and a year. So we have a great opportunity to see a large breadth of different organizations. We focus specifically on B2B, but, from a couple million in revenue to a couple billion in revenue, technology companies, healthcare organizations, financial services, business services, advanced manufacturing. So I really like the variety. And I think one of the great things is being able to see the breadth and depth and really be able to, when I'm talking to a client, say, hey, you're having this challenge, this other company over here had the same challenge and here's what they did and here's what worked for them. The challenge is sometimes is that when you're not a practitioner, you don't see it through. So we coach our clients, we help them, we have ongoing relationships with them where we get to, advise them on a regular basis. And there's some clients I'm talking with, on a weekly basis even, But, obviously there's only so much I can do as an advisor and as a coach. So, in most cases, we're able to guide our clients along and do well. Obviously, sometimes there are some challenges, but, I think if there's anything, that's really the biggest thing. But I think that's true of any role where you're consulting or advising or, guiding or coaching, whatever. We've been doing this for a number of years. So we've kind of figured out, even if we're not there on site doing with them in person, what are the ways that we can help people, give them as much a chance as possible to actually put things into practice.
I personally have a lot of experience doing exactly what you're talking about. And sometimes I've walked into organizations and I've seen there's a pretty big gap between IT and, I'm using air quotes here, the business. And that's a lot of times where product management sort of lives, product management, product development sort of lives in that area there. You've been doing this for a while. And like you said, you've been working with a lot of different organizations. What are some common red flags maybe that you see when you first step into some of these organizations that are looking for your type of help? What are some common ones that people are struggling with these days?
So, I think a lot of times people come to us with kind of I don't want to say a generic request, but the kind of under the general umbrella of, hey, we know our product management team needs to be improved, right? So they might say we need some training, or they might say we need to mature our product management team or make them more strategic or things like that. And then when we kind of peel back the onion a bit, usually there's a couple things that are driving that. So oftentimes there are people in product management roles that just have not ever had any guidance on what it means to be a product manager. Right. And I really can't fault them. I use this analogy sometimes of, if I wanted to work in finance and I went to the CFO of a company and said, hey, I want to work in finance, he or she would say, well, Jeff, what financial background do you have? And I'd say, well, I took management accounting, but that was back in college, a long time ago. They probably wouldn't hire me because I just don't have the experience. And if they did hire me, they'd sit me down next to a whole bunch of other people who are doing the same thing that I'm doing, and I'd shadow them, and I'd be an apprentice, and they'd get me up to speed. If I wanted to be a developer, same thing. I go to the CTO and say, I want to be a developer. They'd say, have you ever done any programming? And I'd say, well, I did a little bit. I dabbled. I would have to, they wouldn't hire me. If they did, they would, train me and put me through a program. But for product managers, a lot of times we take someone and say, hey, this person seems like they know the product well, and they seem to like talking to customers, or they seem to know the technology. So, hey, magically now you're a product manager. And we just kind of expect people to be able to know what they're doing and function at a high level. And without an understanding of the role, much less training and coaching and guidance, it's really unreasonable to expect them to perform at a high level. Many people are able to figure it out on their own. That's how a lot of us figured it out. So I think that's one of the kind of, if I had to say one of the most common things that we see, it's where it's, we have product managers in organizations that are very technical or tactically focused.
Right.
They are acting as order takers from sales, or they are focused on, we can build this cool technology without thinking, well, what problems does it solve and which segments of the market is it most appropriate for, and should we charge more for it and things like that.
One of the other things that I've read about on your company's site is about the confusion between whether they should have a product manager or they should have a product owner, or if the project manager should be the product owner. I'm guessing that comes up a lot when you're stepping into that sort of area you just described.
Yeah, it's interesting. This whole area of roles and responsibilities is a big topic. So that can take a couple of flavors. So one, like you mentioned, is within agile, should the product manager also be the product owner, right? Can one person wear both those hats, or do you need two people wearing those hats? It takes other forms as well. So we deal a lot with, product management versus product marketing. What are the roles and responsibilities there? And in many cases, that's an even more complicated, confusing thing because, titles are thrown around and people have historical baggage they carry with them. In some cases, actually, last week I was talking with a company where user experience was part of the product management function, which is something that, is a good practice we recommend, and we see that more and more commonly. But there was not much clarity, and there was actually a little conflict between product management and user experience. We see it sometimes between product management and project management or program management, or, sometimes with product development. So, back to your earlier question of, that's another area that we do a lot of work in, and a lot of organizations need help, especially as they're growing, just really clarifying, when we were small, we had one person who did a bunch of stuff. Now that we're bigger, we need to really clarify roles and responsibilities and levels. And within Agile, you have that additional element of this role of product owner that Agile defines. And I think a lot of organizations struggle with, how can we most effectively staff that, because there's a lot of responsibilities that come with being a product owner, and there's a lot of responsibilities that come with being a product manager. And in many cases, it's very difficult to do both of those things well and, have the time in the day to do it.
So when you're talking about those agile sort of transformations, is that also part of the type of work that you're doing? Is you're coming in and helping not only talk about those roles, but you're also coming in to talk about processes and metrics and those types of things?
Yeah, most of the companies we work with have already made the decision to be agile or how to be agile. So usually we're not, giving them advice on, well, should you do this agile or versus traditional or something like that. From our research, about 80% of B2B companies have adopted some form of agile in product development and software development already. So, it's already happening. What we see a lot of times is the move to be agile was driven by the engineering function. So it was a decision that in many cases was made solely by product development, or maybe it was pushed ahead by product development, and maybe product management was consulted. And what we find is oftentimes where organizations struggle is, how do we align this agile project management approach with what kind of the broader product management picture? Mm-hmm. So, it's funny. I was actually doing an event with some clients yesterday, and we were talking about this challenge. And, I said, a lot of cases what we see is, product managers will really like agile because they can be nimble and flexible. And, whenever a customer requests them, then they can adapt to it. But product management leaders often find that causes their product managers to be too reactive and adapted to tactical things, right? So we get all of our development resources focused on little minor improvements or bug fixes or enhancements, and we never get around to doing the really big things that are necessary for the long-term strategy and will really drive the company and the product forward. And, everyone's nodding their heads and saying, yes, we deal with that challenge. So where we really focus is on, if you are going to be agile, what does product management need to do and do differently? And quite frankly, there's lots of Scrum classes and training classes and books and things like that out there that can tell you how to run a stand-up and, how to do story point estimation. But in most cases, product managers have never really gotten any guidance on how to be a product manager in Agile. They might have gotten product owner training, but, what a product owner does on a day-to-day basis is a small fraction of what product managers need to be doing.
Do you find, though, that as I do, I find this a lot in organizations where that role of the product manager is just ill-defined? It's I like to say it's usually whatever marketing and development does not want to do is sort of where that person gets in there. And I think you kind of touched on this, right? Like sometimes they're surrogates for sales. Mm-hmm. I even did an episode of the show called what I've heard it referred to as the sales prevention department. So to your point, I think there's tons of opportunity for growth and learning in that role. But why do you find that the struggle to standardize sort of that role within organization has been so difficult when project management has got certifications up the yin, what's holding back organizations and the role of the product manager these days?
Yeah, I think it's a great observation, and the answer is I don't know. It's kind of an interesting sociological question of why is there clarity around what a salesperson does and what a finance person does, but not what a product manager does. Mm-hmm. If I had to venture a guess, I think there's probably a couple things. I think number one is sale. At SiriusDecisions, we focus on sales, marketing, and product. So I'll look at those three functions, right? So sales has been around for a long time, right? I think everyone kind of understands what a salesperson does. Mm-hmm. Sales has been around for decades, if not, millennia. So, right. We have a long history to go on. Marketing is by comparison much newer. I think the marketing function overall is well understood, although I would say there's still a lot of confusion within different marketing roles similar to what confusion there is within product management. So, product marketing is another area that we see a lot of confusion around. And then other things like marketing operations and things like that, there's similar levels of confusion. But I think, again, we have more of a track record and,